What is up, everyone? I am Charlie Shrem, and you are listening and watching Untold Stories with two special guests today, where twice a week we get to dive deep with some of crypto's most influential leaders, the brightest crayons in the box, the smartest people in the room, the people that are one egg addition in addition to a dozen. I keep saying these like terms, like basically how specific people I believe are able to like harness their brain capacity a little bit better than the average person. Like I'm the average, and then I'm having people on this show that are have that ability to think a little bit greater. So you look at like folks like Elon Musk, and then all the guests of the past 167 episodes. I don't think there's one show that I don't learn anything. And so before I get into it, we wouldn't be here today without blockworks.co. They're a media and production company that I trust the most. They're my best friends. Without them, this podcast wouldn't be here today. Make sure you check them out. News, media, other podcast events at blockworks.co. And with that, I am so proud and honored to introduce two people who I consider some of the closest friends that I have today. I'm going to start with you, my friend Phil Leibovski. Phil, you're trading right now. You run a concierge trading desk for many, many years. There's not many people who understand the mechanics of what's going on behind the scenes on a day-to-day basis. When there's something going on in crypto, you and I are the first people to start talking about like what the hell's going on. And my other dear friend, Steve Capone. Oh my God, Steve, you were the reason that this podcast is even here today. And we'll tell that story in a moment. But now you're the VP of marketing for Fidelity Digital Assets. Previously, you were the chief marketing officer at Voyager Digital, one of my best investments because of you, actually. And you got me to be working there, and I got to be a part of that the early days in that company. Thank you. And you were a senior strategist at Microsoft, and so it's safe to say that you know how to think.
And speak,
And
perhaps, you know.
thank you guys so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you.
No, this
Thanks,
is
Charlie.
this is really, 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 really great. Have you guys?
And we're all friends.
Yeah.
Yes, we are.
No, but like, I want to go back for a second and tell that story. Why don't you tell the story from your end, like how you were introduced to me, and then I want to tell the story, Steve, of how this podcast came to be.
Yeah, and I'll first say that you always give me too much credit on this. I think I just maybe connected some dots, which arguably, when you say that, you know, I know how to think and speak, I don't know. I think so much of like my work is connecting dots.
Sure.
So you know, you and I met in the early days when I was working. You know, I was the first real full-time employee at Voyager after the founders had an idea to bring this crypto broker to market, and you know, I've since moved on, joined the team at Fidelity, but you know, so proud of what that team has done. And in the early days, as we were, you know, piecing the company together, looking, you know, to bring the appropriate advisors in, build the team, just through some connections in the industry, we were introduced. And, you know, as you said, we were kind of kindred spirits. We were on a call with, I don't know, half a dozen other people.
Yeah.
It was like one of those calls where it just became you and I just talking.
Yeah.
And like everyone else drowned out. And it became very clear that like, okay, these guys, they're going to figure things out together. And we like,
Meanwhile,
developed
it's
a
like
friendship.
two of us, like young, like kids, basically, like brainstorming and strategizing a $1 billion company here, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, it started as, you know, I think a friendship between the two of us, and always looking for ways to get you more involved in Voyager. Obviously, your experience with BitInstant, and I think you always talk about this so well, as to kind of, you know, Voyager being a crypto broker, being like a new realized version of what you were doing years back. So clearly, kind of a lot of wisdom and experience from you, and the Voyager team and the board and the founders were really eager to bring that in. And I was just kind of a, you know, a liaison of sorts, just through our formed friendship, to help do that. So, you know, you came in and joined as an advisor to the team, and continued to get more involved as kind of we, you know, grew a professional relationship and a personal relationship, and our families got to know each other, so on and so forth. And I think this was early on before you started sort of building yourself as more of a, dare I say, media personality. Maybe you always were one, but now more officially with your own control.
You were the kind of like, I remember talking to you about starting a podcast, and you were having beers with my executive producer, Jason Yanowitz, and both of you had to take a chance on me because uh at that time I was going through the crazy like Winklevoss litigation or whatever, and it ended up like, I guess when a door closes another one opens, and out of ashes rises the falcon or whatever. And so needed that down and fighting, defending myself in order to like start this show. And that gave it the whole moxie. So thank you for doing that. And then I just thought that we would like hang out and work together in Voyager, and we did for a few months. And the next thing I know, you're moving over, you cross the line over to the institutional side.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, like I think it was true. I was sitting there having beers with Jason. You and I just spoke about it, and I very much operate under this like good people should know good people.
Yeah.
We both think super highly of the Blockworks team, and Phil, like, throw you in that mix, right? That's all I think why Charlie introduced us, and
Right.
just good people should know good people. But yeah, Charlie, just to circle back on that. So I left Voyager, nothing more than like a super positive experience. For me, it was a bit of a life change. I spent half a dozen years in more kind of entrepreneurial startup land, had my own consulting practice. That's actually how I met the Voyager team and helping bring that business to market before I joined full time. And then I would say predominantly for personal reasons, but also wanting to get more exposure to the institutional side of finance and the institutional side of crypto. And decided to join the team at Fidelity Digital Assets to lead marketing there. And little did I know it would somewhat turn into the year of institutional crypto.
Yeah.
And I can't take all the credit for that, but I will take credit for maybe accidental good timing.
As you were like texting me that you were moving over, and we were talking about it, I was like in one of the last Fidelity branches with my brother-in-law because he was trying to like sell his 401k to buy Bitcoin. And I was actually the one there convincing him not to do it because like I'm all about having a big percentage of your net worth in crypto, but I'm also not about speculating with your rent either. And so, he ended up hybrid listening. He ended up taking the money out, but starting his own business, investing in your personal capital. Because now he started a company that he can invest in Bitcoin every single week.
There you go.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Phil, you and I met
4 years
probably
ago?
4 years
Yeah.
ago in the trading world.
That's true. I actually only met you in person 2 years ago, but we've known each other almost 5.
Charlie, you have a lot of friends like that.
Yeah.
I guess these days everyone does.
Those are the best friends, though.
That's the nature of crypto.
Yeah.
A lot of my friends are WhatsApp only. We're slowly moving over to Signal and Telegram, but it's true. There's a lot of friends that I've never met in person. But Charlie, definitely, I'm happy that I'm here now in Sarasota with you, helping out with some of these podcasts.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be where I am today with our concierge trading service that we provide in Canada.
That's awesome.
We've excelled for sure.
Over the years, you've really like taken hold and allowed a lot of companies that need to be buying into crypto and buying out of, selling out of it. You've provide and the pre-Fidelity days. So now like Fidelity
For sure.
as an institution is looking at kind of doing concierge, actually, yeah, doing concierge trading like the next on a professional level is the way it should be.
Sure.
Not to say that you're not professional, but with concierge trading and how it all started, I remember a lot of it largely is done on things like WhatsApp and chat rooms and,
Sure.
and emails, and it's fast. Like you can get things done, you can move quickly. So you guys are both, and I have a great question for both of you. You guys are both servicing like very different types of clients, but you're both having to operate on chain. And so here's kind of like a question. I'm using DeFi, you guys are using DeFi, you're playing with Ethereum, I'm playing with Ethereum, we're all having fun. Ethereum is going
all
through
paying crazy gas fees.
That's exactly my question. So right now, Ethereum is going through this scaling issue that Bitcoin went through and Bitcoin solved. Will So now, like, I'm paying crazy gas fees all the time using Uniswap, $60 to $150 a
Mhm.
transaction, and it's insane. Will Ethereum continue to lose market share? And I want both of you guys to answer this because you are using all these chains and you are interacting with clients. You're both helping with custody. You're interacting more than I am. Do you think that other chains are actually gaining market shares realistically, or really it's still just Bitcoin and Ethereum and everything else is speculation?
Steve, do you
Phil,
want
you
to
want to
start?
go first?
um, I mean, Bitcoin and Ethereum are still the most dominant in my view. You can see that especially this week when Bitcoin takes a tumble and Ethereum follows, and you look at my entire portfolio, it all moved literally the same amount of percentages. But I think that with the delay with Ethereum 2.0, it just gives an opportunity for other networks like Cardano, Polkadot. Those are the two that I'm eyeing to take more of a dominant stance. Um, I do hope Ethereum prevails with 2.0, but right now I'm focusing on other projects and platforms.
People are using like Bitcoin as the store of value, and you're holding on to like USDC and USDT as store of value, but are people holding on to ETH as a long-term store of value?
I, I, I think currently, yes, because everyone is anticipating a pump, which is a speculative decision. But in the long term, I don't see that being the case. I actually don't even see Bitcoin as a good store of value because of its volatility. My good store of value is Tether or USDC.
Yeah.
I never understood why people said Bitcoin has a good store of value when it fluctuates 20% a day.
Yeah. Well, so I think about it a little bit differently. Traditionally speaking, right, a store of value has, aligns with different attributes of money, um, and is typically a good hedge, at times a hedge against inflation. So there are, look at gold, right, in the history of gold and how it's been used in portfolios by investors. And what you're looking for in a store of value, in particular these days in the global macro environment that we're in, um, you know, is that attribute of digital scarcity that Bitcoin brings to the table. And I think uh, it's very clear what happened throughout 2020 and the institutional interest in Bitcoin, and it is because of that 21 million attribute and that certainty around that scarcity. I don't think that exists with Ethereum, right? As we all know. So um, in it, you know, I don't think that, just in my personal experience and just my studying of the space, we're seeing that demand from major investors. Or, Ethereum may be a great trade, right? Like, to your point, Phil, like, and Bitcoin's a great trade. Um, but in terms of a place to store value, I haven't seen Ethereum really kind of looked at in that way. I look at it as somewhat of a venture capital investment. And by the way, many people look at Bitcoin as a venture capital investment, right? It
Exactly.
can be many things to many people. It can be a payments and remittance technology. It could be a venture. It could play a role in a portfolio, and certainly just be a store of value, in particular, a hedge against deflation, a response to monetary policy. I look at Ethereum more as like, hey, there is an entire new operating system to finance, and this potentially is the underbelly to that. Charlie, to your point about they've had scaling issues, how much of a problem is that? It's a problem, like, of course. I think there's such a long history and a developer base against Ethereum now. Like,
Yeah.
they really have created quite a gap that obviously they they need to resolve some of these issues from a scale standpoint and move more rapidly to Ethereum 2.0. I do think they have some runway.
You talk about like a this being a VC investment when typically when investors invest in something, they give it like a 5-year horizon. They don't want like so these come so MicroStrategies owns 90,000 Bitcoins, crazy amounts, and a lot of other companies have put it on his balance sheets as well. Uh 5-year horizon, are these companies or folks that are investing in Ethereum or Bitcoin or whatever, are they looking at this as they just want it to appreciate against the dollar better, or like so a hedge, or they're actually looking to make money on this?
I think both, right? I think the former is the primary use case, and I think it's important to separate the two things around like this time horizon. You know, the normal VC portfolio and appreciation of that portfolio being say 5 to 10 years, potentially more depending on the technology sector. I don't think, and I don't, want to speculate every single institutional investor. We can point to some things that say, like Michael Saylor has said publicly, right? Clearly the most aggressive from a corporate balance sheet standpoint. He's quite proud of it. He talks about owning like for 100 years, and he, refers to
Wow.
cash being kind of a melting ice cube. I don't know if that's hyperbole or not, but I think it points to his mindset. And I think most institutional investors, just in my personal observation and kind of what's been stated publicly, are not really looking at this as a venture investment. In fact, a lot of these companies have venture arms, right?
Mm.
So if you take any public company or private company that wants to participate in Bitcoin or other crypto assets, if they were looking at it as a venture investment, it's fair to say they maybe would look to a venture part of their firm, a venture fund that they may have. Obviously, venture is all about alpha and return on investment. Balance sheet investments play a different role. They either play a strategic role. When we look at Square, right, they
Yes.
pointed that out.
Yeah.
But I think this is more about, to your point, the hedge against inflation and more of the economic.
What are some
factors.
good balance sheet investments? Like, what does that term mean?
Yeah, I mean, this ventures into an area where I wouldn't like. I'm not a corporate treasurer,
Yeah.
so so I can just go by what I like to somewhat play, to your point, I'm a thinker, and like to somewhat be like a naive marketer, right?
I love that. Yeah.
Marketing's my trade, and I'm pretty naive to these things. And I just, like you, I read Twitter, I read content, and just draw my own
Connect the dots.
observations. But in particular, like in my observations, balance sheet investments, typically are things that come as a corporate business development investment, M&A type of investments. They typically play a strategic role for the firm, whereas a venture capital investment is more about alpha return.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. That is the strategy, to return capital. It doesn't have to be strategically aligned with the goals of the company. You take a business like Square, they have or PayPal.
Yeah.
Not to say that PayPal has put Bitcoin on the balance sheet, but they have a strategic play with these particular assets. There's clearly their business.
It's their business model. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's all these different type of folks that are either investing in whatever VC, balance sheet type of investments, as a currency, as a hedge against the world. There's all different reasons for everything now. Phil, are you seeing the same type of thing?
Most definitely. We're seeing everyone except for pension funds really being interested in it. I've had calls from family funds, VCs specifically, more so than anything because of the speculative nature of the investments. The balance sheet strategies, I personally don't understand. Like, for example, in the case of Tesla and Elon Musk, I'm not sure what the strategy is there. It seems to be more of a PR play than anything. But back to the store of value, I think that's when you're going to see retirement funds and pension funds buying big blocks and putting that away in the vault. I still see it as a speculative investment, and I don't know how long it's going to last. I mean, I'm very bullish on Bitcoin, but again, I don't see the store of value argument prevailing
over the long term. Yeah, interesting.
DeFi, DeFi, DeFi. You keep hearing me talk about it, and we know at the same time that the stock market is at record highs, but the economy is broken in recession. Government debt is off the charts. They're printing trillions of dollars. We need a new financial system, and I've been talking about it. We've all been talking about it. Decentralized finance. We know that too. We know that there's like $40 billion in value sitting in all these DeFi protocols, and it's barely a year old. It's new decentralized finance, and it's brilliant, and it works. And there's a lot of money to be made in things like yield farming, being able to provide liquidity, but a lot of them are high risk. There's scams and rug pulls that are so common to investors. We don't want to repeat what happened a few years ago in the crypto space. But what if there was a way to access those DeFi yields in a safe and transparent way? Well, I had the CEO, Tim Frost of Yield.app, my newest sponsor on the show. Listen to that show and check out Yield.app, because here you have this team that is constantly filtering through all these DeFi investments. They're consolidating your gas fees, and they're only investing in a select few that generate more than 20%. But their risk is they're not just investing in these tokens and waiting for them to do well. They're also providing liquidity. They're doing yield farming, all these low risk, high investment to make the infrastructure more efficient and better. So not only you're investing in making money, but you're also helping to grow this ecosystem. Make sure you check them out at yield.app. That's yield.app. And listen to the Untold Stories with Tim Frost, the CEO. We have all these coins and tokens, and they sit on all these different blockchains, and we have to keep multiple wallets and different addresses and everything. And the only way to do it without having to do that is trust a centralized place like an exchange or a broker or an app that you use. Well, what if there was a way to do it without having to trust one different place in the ethos of crypto? Cosmos, my sponsor Cosmos, that has been around for so long, they're actually following their original roadmap and being able to offer universal wallet, high node synchronization, inter-blockchain communication, bridging Bitcoin and Ethereum together and keeping it all on one wallet, being able to build on top of it and do the coolest things possible. Make sure you check them out at stargate.cosmos.network. That's cosmos.stargate.network. You can play with all these different features. It's so cool, and it's really bringing the next wave of crypto and adoption. If you really want to be ahead of everyone else and all your friends, make sure you understand the new technology that's coming out. stargate.cosmos.network. You're going to love it.
I was to read you a quote by Michael Saylor. He said, "If you want to preserve value, you have to hold scarce assets. Bitcoin is the most liquid, scarce, uncorrelated asset you can buy." Before Bitcoin existed, what were other super liquid, scarce, uncorrelated assets? Are there any?
I think you brought in an attribute there that makes that question hard to answer. There may be.
Which one? Which attribute?
Super liquid.
Super
Yeah,
liquid.
exactly. I mean,
Real real estate, as you know, Charlie, like tends to be a good store of value, or perceived as a good store of value from
until
investors.
2009.
So the thing with real estate,
currencies, I guess,
we can use real estate as a good example to like explain efficient markets, right? You look at the price of your home. That's the price that you will get if you put in the maximum amount of work to sell your home. Maximum amount of work. You can have right now a wholesale buyer come and buy your house. You can close and have a check today if you're willing to take 75%, 75%, or even 60% of the dollar. So it's all about efficient. If there was a way to trade real estate in an efficient way on markets, you would never see situations like that. You'd be able to actually get the maximum value for your house. You'd be able to sell percentages of your property and then have that tradable, securitized against like a token or legal security, where a token represents like equity in your home or whatever, that you can go into an app and instantly do it. To me, that's like some of the most interesting things that's happening in the space right now. What do you guys think are like some of the most interesting things?
NFTs.
Can you explain NFTs? Like, I get NFTs, and I just sometimes I'm so lost in the long-term vision that I don't understand the short-term shit that's going on.
Phil, do you get a kick at it when Charlie says this as someone who like was in so early and clearly had long-term vision?
He's being sarcastic.
No, I really don't.
No, the NFTs I don't understand at all, to be honest. I've never invested. I've never even.
I think you guys understand it. You may not agree, but I think
I don't see this speculative, crazy value. I'm trying to understand what's going on here, because, like,
some NFTs were like 60.
Yeah, they're like trading like NFTs that represent actual artwork. I own art that I have. It's immutable, and the fact that I own it is immutable on the blockchain. If I wanted to sell it, I could. But there's a physical something there that I think is valuable. So from what I understand with NFTs is that digital artwork now has digital value, scarce value.
Yeah, I mean, I've been trying to spend more time lately and really dive into NFTs, and you're starting to see real prominent figures like Gary Vaynerchuk get really bullish on the space. I think Mark Cuban has been quite vocal on it as well. I know he has
Sure.
on DeFi. So let's unpack this a little bit more, because I think you teed it up the right way, Charlie, which is like talking about scarcity and store of value. Um, we were talking about real estate, and by the way, like, there are ways to own real estate through more liquid investment products, right? It may
Yeah.
not be direct ownership. In the world of crypto, we tend to think a lot about direct custody and no keys, no coin. But just like you can
So
access
like
Bitcoin
Cadre
through
or something like that, you can own fractional real estate.
Cadre, but there are even there are ETFs and funds that or you can invest in real estate companies. So there are lots of ways to participate in that market and have real estate in your portfolio, right? If you are just I will preface this saying this is not investment advice,
Sure.
but
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
if you are an investor and looking, you can't afford a whole home or commercial real estate, there are vehicles out there that enable you to access real estate in some way, shape, or form, different types of real estate, maybe server farms or things like that, real estate of your liking, commercial in particular, in your portfolio. But all that leads to different types of store of value. So art, I was going to name that as like, what are other stores of value? Art, collectibles in general, over time have been particular stores of value. What's really interesting going on that I think doesn't maybe get talked about enough, and I don't have all the data on this, but I've been hearing a lot about it lately, is while we're seeing this rise of NFTs, and I think a lot of it is art. I was corrected recently in that not all NFTs is art. Whether it's music, it's
Oh, it's
really
not.
is about this uniqueness and digital scarcity.
Right.
A friend of mine is like really into baseball cards and basketball cards and stuff like that. And yes, there's interesting stuff going on with like NBA Top Shot and stuff like that. But at the same rate, and I think this is where like guys like Gary Vee are coming from. I grew up like collecting baseball cards and stuff there. I think they're sitting in my parents' garage somewhere. And a friend said, "Hey,
I
you
have
should
one
go get
card.
them
Mm.
because they're now worth more, like they're back again, and there's a lot of value in these, like,
Hmm.
sports card, collect baseball cards, basketball cards, who knows, maybe magic cards, I don't know.
Right.
But it's not coincidence that this is happening at the same time, right? This is a larger
You're
thematic of
talking
digital
about a way to
scarcity.
liquefy old baseball cards, though.
Well, no, what someone was just, you can like literally go on eBay
It's a
now
liquid
and
market. Yeah.
sell analog baseball cards and basketball cards for more than they have been in a very long time. Like, so
Oh,
let's just like take out our crypto world for a second, right?
it's
Like,
Right.
very hard to
just
do.
I know it's so hard, but that analog market, right, of collectibles that a lot of us is like when we were young, and not
Mm.
to say it's a young, but like tends to be when you get most interested. There has been a resurgence in that market again. And I think it points to this larger theme of owning things that are scarce, right? NFTs are digital scarcity. Bitcoin is digital scarcity. Gold, bars of gold, is a degree of analog scarcity, and
Mm.
baseball cards are a degree of analog scarcity. It all falls under that thematic of scarcity.
My Pokemon cards were stolen from my garage last year, and this year I noticed that they were going up for tens of thousands of dollars. So there is a big movement in these scarce art items, of course. But I don't know if it will last forever. I think as people were bored during the pandemic.
You're down. So like Steve and I kind of like, let's look at like crypto as a war. I don't like to actually to use that because I don't like violence. But like, let's just say this was a war without violence, which doesn't make any sense.
The
Steve and
competition.
I are like kind of like in the back theorizing with the glasses, and we're like maps and shit like that. You're like in the trenches on day
Right.
to day, which is why your perspective, not that you're not in the trenches, Steve. You're Phil, like trading uh uh with people directly and with companies directly. And
Right.
and I know that Steve and Fidelity, you guys are so massive right now. But I wanted to get into scarcity, but don't let me forget, Steve, to ask you after kind of like how you're what you're in a strategic way going to be able to set Fidelity apart, and I know you've been working on that, but you can answer that later. But I wanna really understand scarcity a little bit more and really unpack this further. What is it in the human psyche that makes us favor scarcity?
store of value.
No, but like forget crypto for a second. Like just
But think of an apocalyptic situation where the world goes to chaos, right? And I need to buy water or anything. I'm pretty sure my Pokemon card is not going to go far. But my gold or things that are actually necessities potentially would, right? So I kind of always seem to think in those extremes.
yeah.
And
I do too, to be
and
honest,
I'm very
sometimes.
principled on that. So I wouldn't go and buy Pokemon cards or baseball cards right now because I don't see that store of value. And truth be told, I don't actually see store of value in the real estate market either because 10 years ago we saw what can happen. It's only liquid until it's not. While Bitcoin and most cryptocurrencies, I hope, will be liquid forever. And it seems like
What's the best way to protect sovereign wealth then? Like you're not sovereign, your own personal empire. If you're someone who has, is earning money and trying to like save it, like uh you look at all these different real estate things, like what are your opinions on that? I seek this answer too. I don't know the answer.
I don't buy real estate.
Investing in yourself is like one of the best
I was
answers
gonna,
ever.
yeah, I would be happy.
You're the best. Yeah.
Be happy and
I think
knowledge.
I think it depends on your investment thesis, right? Like, that may be an out of an answer, but
Sure.
like clearly investors like Michael Saylor, or CEOs, I should say, or a Paul Tudor Jones, or some of these allocators, institutional allocators to Bitcoin, they have a thesis that inflation is actually higher than reported, than that's represented in consumer inflation.
Sure.
So they really cling to different stores of value that don't align with particular fiat currencies as a store of value that are a hedge against that. So that said, there are a class of investors that don't agree with that, right? Or that maybe agree that Bitcoin is the answer to that, but they're gold bugs or whatever. So,
Sure.
like one of the things that I've learned so much in, working just in financial services, having more exposure to a large financial firm, is there is a really wide palette of investment theses, right? Depending on who you are, what your just what your capital is, what your balance sheet is, what your goals are. Like Charlie, your goals, my goals, and Phil's goals all are different, right? Right now, my family is concentrated on buying a new home and getting out of the city a little bit, and
Yeah.
yours may be upgrading your studio or something like that, right? Like they're just,
I'm like
it
actually
really,
downgrading. Not like downgrading, but I feel like I got heavy over the years, not just physically weight wise, but just like in stuff. And I learned something very interesting about myself. And sorry to interrupt you. Um, during the 2017 bubble, I bought a boat, Satoshi. We called it Satoshi, and we just sold it the other day. We just sold Satoshi after 4 years.
you
I
sold
know
Satoshi? I didn't know that.
I did. We sold Satoshi, and we did it because first I was looking at this depreciating asset out my window every day, and like my whole life is just telling people to like get out of these depreciating assets, and here I am just like owning one. But that was okay because when we sold it, I looked at my wife, Courtney, and I was like, "Do you miss the boat?" And she said, "No, I miss the experiences we had on it.
Mhm.
We're not attached." And I didn't know this. We didn't know this about each other, Courtney and I, until now. We both aren't attached to things, but we're attached to experiences. So I don't like owning things. I lease my car. I don't like owning things.
That's a very, very millennial outlook on life.
Yeah. Interesting thought though. But then how do you invest in stuff when you're like you lose sleep at night? Like Steve, help me answer this. Like I lose sleep at night because I feel the dollars going down in value second by second. And like I'm just it's like deflating. It's like you're constantly fighting a deflationary like value of your assets. So you have to go into these assets that are not going to lose value as much as the dollar will, or whatever, because we're told to save the dollar. But the dollar, like it's not just about, you talk about inflation, and I know I'm running off on rambling here, but inflation is a government metric that to make us feel better about the world. But really, even the consumer price index, forget that. Go to your coffee shop, create your own index. I tell people, look at the Big Mac index. Take something that you're buying on a monthly basis and just remember what that cost over the course of years.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. In the peak of COVID, like just to play on that a little bit, in like the peak of COVID in New York City, we're a meat eating household. I was vegan for many years, but we're a meat eating household. We eat a lot of meat, and like I remember going out and shopping for just like some chicken to to bring home. And the price of just like a pack of chicken breasts, I can't remember. It was something like $16.99 or $19.99. It was unreal.
Yeah.
Like it was $26 to buy 2 chicken breasts, which you could go out to a really nice restaurant
Buy a
and
whole
buy that.
chicken for that price.
So to your, I think to your point, we experience this in different ways in our lives. If we were a vegan household, right, the supply chain for our food may have looked very different than sort of a carnivore household. So I think you
Good
do bring up
point.
a good point. The gallon of milk has always been a price that that a lots of folks have looked at as a way to track inflation. But I do think there's a lot more data available these days for you to establish your own personal inflation metrics, but that is a little bit different aside from developing a portfolio
Interesting.
of investable assets.
Well, like here in America, we look at gas and oil over the years. Like, tell me right now, if you're an American, you've not looked at the price of gas since you were a child, right? We think of gas and oil, gas, petroleum or whatever in our cars as this scarce asset, right? So when the price goes up, we're like hoarding. People line up for hurricanes coming. But just the other day, I was talking to my friend, my Saudi friend, and I was talking to him, and I said, so. Tell me about like we were just chatting about like COVID and everything. How's it going over there? And I said, yeah, like I'm thankful that gas prices didn't go up in America or whatever. And he said, listen, gas is fucking so cheap and free here. You can go to the street corner and people give you barrels of petroleum for your car. I can send like it's so cheap and free here. We don't look at that as a scarce asset, but we don't have food. Some of my friends can't even put food on there. So what does this do? Drink the gas, drink the oil. So like what we here look at as scarce, that we have abundance of vegetables and food. Other places it's the opposite foot. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. On a micro household level and on a nation state level,
Macro.
The business that I work in every day has a degree of global exposure, and some of the things that you hear from investors in different markets. I mean, there's certainly a lot of fiscal stimulus happening, a lot of major nations around the world. So the U.S. isn't the only one where investors and households are perhaps forced to think about inflation a
Yeah.
little bit more. But the amount, what our experience has been with COVID and the government response and the monetary response is different here in the domestic United States than in other nations. So you could look at it on a micro household level, you're a chicken eater or not, or you can look at it as your nation and your dependency on a commodity like
Yeah, maybe we're
oil
too
or
dependent.
your government's, monetary policy.
Switching gears a little bit here, we're talking about scarcity, we're talking about inflation, we're talking about supply chains and food and being vegan. It sounds to me like everything that we're talking about has a common thread of like we want the world to be better than we left it. We're all born, but we all got into crypto. You could tell me whatever reason you want, but I know that deep down, every person in this space, if you work or hold or if you do anything, if you just listen to this podcast and you don't do anything else, it's because you love the earth that we live on. You love this world. Phil, you've been traveling around a lot lately, especially during COVID,
Right.
trying to figure out how to make this world a better place. You've been studying seaweed. You've been
Right.
studying. Tell me about that. Like, so there are a lot of crypto folk that have said, like, okay, I've figured out how to make the world a better place financially now, but that's not enough. You want to like sink your teeth into like more.
Definitely not enough. And if we want to talk about scarcity, I think the environment is probably the most scarce thing we have on this planet. So yeah, I was fortunate enough to visit Necker Island a couple of weeks ago, and there was an ocean summit, Ultramarine, hosted by Susie Mai. It was eye-opening. I went on the trip to get some inspiration, but I think the biggest problem right now is our energy sources, and it was mind-blowing how we could be carbon neutral.
Could we be carbon neutral?
It seems to me that yes. I believe last year there was a flight from Indonesia to New York. It flew empty, but it flew 100% on biofuel, which I didn't know was possible. So I'm very early and it's very preliminary for me, but I'm looking at all these other substitutes for plastics and biofuels. All of a sudden, it's not as scarce.
It's attainable.
It's attainable, yeah. So it's all about perspective, and it's if you're vegan, coronavirus is probably easier for you than if you're a carnivore, right? So it's all about perspective and how you see life. So it's exciting, and to your point, it's changed. That the world can be a better place, and that's why crypto is so exciting for me. It's just the approach, how we do things. Yeah.
Phil, I think it's such a great point. I was listening to, I'm sure we all listen to Elon every once in a
Sure.
while, and for the most part, he can come across as fairly radical, regardless of what you think about his, Tesla's Bitcoin allocation or anything. And he was doing an interview recently, and he was talking a lot about what you just said, Phil and Charlie, how you introduced the topic of just we only have one Earth, and there's nothing more scarce than that. And
Yeah.
it and we're it just also to tie this back to the investing world too. I mean, outside of crypto and Bitcoin, at an institutional level and beyond, that like one of the large thematics has been ESG in investing, environmental, social, and governance
Huge.
investing. So
Huge.
we're seeing it in represented in capital markets as well. But there, to your point, there's something really kind of core at humanity around honoring scarcity, and at times it's confusing and troubling how investors from more of a capitalistic standpoint can honor that thematic, but in our everyday lifestyles and sort of how we think about the environment, that thematic isn't always as honored.
That is a very interesting perspective. That's a very interesting way of looking at it. We have to honor scarcity. And that's
Yeah, like we put our money where our mouth is, but we don't like always put our mouth where our mouth is, right? Like,
Right.
like we if the Earth is an investable asset, right? In some way, shape, or
100%.
form. It may not trade, EARTH or something like that, right? But to some
could
degree,
tokenize
it's
the
an
Earth.
asset that
Well, carbon tokens. I mean,
Carbon tokens, yeah, energy tokens. You can tokenize
anything.
anything.
Yes, yeah, and I'm not even proposing that per se, but like if we just bring it back to
You're gonna see like headlines, Fidelity's tokenizing everything. He's like, I'm not proposing that.
definitely,
We're gonna cut this
yeah,
part
we'll definitely
out.
not see that.
No, I'm
But
just joking.
but aside from the fact that you can tokenize a lot of things, I think it is worth pointing out that treasuring scarce assets and the value of scarce assets is something that in capital markets, and we can just, I think, label that a capitalistic framework, is honored, and is considered fundamental. And I think in society, particularly in America, like I don't know how fundamental that is. I think you maybe have a lot of people, well-intentioned people, who have portfolios and investment theses that honor scarcity, but maybe on their day-to-day life don't do the things that honor Earth as a scarce asset.
Good point.
The more the work that goes in to, like, for lack of a better term, digging out that scarce asset from the Earth, and that could be anything, the more treasured. Let's look at your child. Think about the work that goes involved in having a child. That is the ultimate scarce asset. Think about like this show, even your business, your partner. Your wife, husband, your children, your parents. Like, just look at that. They're scarce. Your friends. You invest and you build friendships. They're scarce. So now, today, our lovely president is going to be printing $2 trillion more of this asset that we were born and raised to believe is scarce. So let me ask you a question that I'm scared about. We printed an insane amount of money in 2001. We printed an insane amount of money in 2008. We're printing an insane amount of money in 2020. It's just the amount of like almost $10 trillion in the span of like 20 something years. I was born. We were all born before the 2000s. So the money, the pre-2000 dollar, was so different than the dollar of today. It was scarce back then. It was something that you would save. What happens now? Like, put on your Fidelity hat for a second, Steve. Like, what happens now? What are we looking at 10 years from now, from fiat currency perspective?
We have a lot of smart researchers at Fidelity that properly wear Fidelity hats that probably have much better answers than I. So I'll just take it, just kind of my personal
Or your
knowledge.
personal view, really, yeah.
I think first off, not to come off high and holy here, but it is worth pointing out that there is a perhaps more than ever a massive population of people in America and around the world where money or fiat currency is still a very scarce asset. If you can't put food on your table, the dollar is a scarce asset, regardless of how much money is printed. And in fact, not to defend the monetary policy, although I do think that there are small businesses and households that are in dire need, like
Yeah.
that is almost precisely why this stimulus exists, because we have a wealth divide in America, more
It's
perhaps more
getting
divided
worse.
than ever, and there are people where the dollar is extremely scarce. So then you look on the flip side of that, wealthier folks who have an excess of dollars, and they say, and the response is, well, lots of dollars were issued and hopefully appropriated to households and small businesses where it is perceived as scarce. Whether we look at M2 money supply and think differently, it was scarce at that micro level, right? Just going back to this point about my world and the outer world could be different at times. Then the wealthier folks who have who the dollar is not scarce for, are forced to form a different investment theses to protect their capital. So, I kind of look at it this as like, it's kind of like Bitcoin. You're permitted to think of it in any way you
Sure.
want. You want to think of it as a great technology. You want to think of it as an economic play. And I think, if the government is going ahead and print money, and it's well intended to go to individuals and households, that based on your particular situation, your household situation, your corporate situation, then you are forced to think about, is this asset scarce to me? Are we deprived? Are we in a sort of a poverty-like situation, and therefore I'm in need of it? Or am I in excess of it, so therefore I have to cling to different stores of value?
Phil, I want to hear your response.
Well put, Steve.
Very well put, Steve.
I don't know. I always wonder where are we going to be in 10 to 20 years, and how will blockchain have a role in our economic system? To me, it's scary when we print $2 trillion worth of money that I don't know how we're going to repay that. So it's hard to answer, to be honest.
The problem is, I see it like, to take, how are we going to repay that? That's exactly the coin. And to take like Steven's thought, I think we're trying to put all the thinking into one bucket, and that thinking is we shouldn't be printing money. I don't. So like,
There could have been credits, or it could have been done differently. And with
exactly my point.
with
It's the
blockchain, you can do that,
mechanisms.
right? Because right now that money can just start flowing out back to the rich at any moment.
You think that $2 trillion, how much of that $2 trillion is actually hitting the people that need those
The
dollars?
supermarkets, probably none of them.
I hate to say it, but the Canadian way of just mailing checks to people every month is better than our $2 trillion package. $1,400 worth of checks to if you're under 75K a year. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I just don't.
That's a lot of money.
So I'm going to provide just by the way, I'm going to provide just an alternative perspective, just for the sake of
Yeah, please.
argument here. I know for a fact a number of small businesses, startups, crypto companies,
right,
that in the earlier phases of COVID, that received PPP to keep employees retained, to keep them on staff, that without that would have laid off or had to shut down their business. Many of these startups are ones that we all appreciate, and like not everyone knows every company's sort of capital situation. So
those companies have accountants, though. They have bookkeepers. My mother-in-law still can't collect unemployment. Still on the phone yesterday for over a year. What's going on there?
Yeah, I think when you take something as massive as an issuance of trillions of dollars, and these bills are how many hundreds or thousands of pages, like, and we have an unfortunate system where there are so many policies that both sides of the house are really looking to introduce, and they we use these times to try and introduce perhaps new progressive policies,
raising unemployment,
And at times
Yeah.
we're not able to simplify things, to your point of just let's just simply get it down to issuing this money to these people or these businesses. Look, it's a really tough job. Like, I think
Right.
sometimes it's very easy to complain about the government and
I
whether
know.
they're, many, I think, many
This is the venting show. We vent our
Yeah, and
frustrations.
I'm not really complaining. I just think it's a desperate move. I get that America has way more
I
population
think
than
it's a
Canada.
populist move too.
So
Yeah.
what's the alternative? What's the alternative? Phil, you're there, you're at the money printer, you pull the plug.
I don't
And
know.
it's like,
Do-
all right,
do
Phil,
the-
now
the-
go to another room and
Communist approach. Give food stamps.
I think
if needed.
I think, yeah, I honestly think if you're talking about radical, don't try to do something radical in a capitalistic way. Do it in a radical way. So, you're talking about like needing to save us all. Let's look at student debt. Let's look at all debt. Let's look at the people that like where do they need it the most? Start from the bottom and work their way up.
yeah.
You look at
Stu-
but everyone is like, yeah, but it's going to be like the wealthy people don't get involved. Well, wealthy people have problems too. They have tax related questions. Wealthy people have, I don't know, I'm not super well, they know all their problems, but there's a way to do it. I guess I don't know the solution, but I can point out the problem.
Like, yeah, a couple of
Yeah.
problems that we saw is I know a handful of companies that didn't necessarily need the relief, and when they received it, they bought Bitcoin with it. And Mark Cuban himself said,
I'm a big fan
should
of that.
well, to what degree, right? Some companies took out a relief and then bought their own stock back. Mark Cuban said that should be illegal, and I agree with him. It's a very difficult problem to solve, and I understand the desperate approach to it, but
we're
these
gonna-
problems are bad, right?
So if we don't look at it as a problem, though, let's just look at it as this money needs to be created. And that, like, the term created is like a tough term to use, but this money needs to be put into circulation because the economy, but not just the economy, the recovery has been too K-shaped. And in order to get back that middle class, this is what needs to happen. 5 years from now, has the creative and manufacturing and technological power of the United States in 5 years from now, are we able to actually like bridge the gap of are we able to bridge the gap of how much money is now in circulation and the increase in like growth and GDP of our country? Has it leveled itself out? Because if not, then you're gonna see a continuance of a crazy consumer price increase, and that's when the guy who needs the dollar the most is gonna have a hard time.
Yeah, and that guy or that household, maybe it's a lower middle or middle class household, in all likelihood has a pension.
Yeah.
And that pension is invested, and what we do at sort of a
Social
more
Security, yeah.
macroeconomic level could impact that portfolio as well. But the fact is this is unprecedented.
Yeah.
That word is used so much in the past year or so, but just to use it in terms like from a monetary policy standpoint, this truly is unprecedented. And I think, Charlie, you are right.
Really is.
The what we need to see, I think, is job growth and like checks to households. I think we all would agree is
Yeah.
a short-term fix,
Of course.
right? Like as magical and powerful as it could be, this is a short-term fix. Where is our country and our economy going, and how do we set up a framework for more organic growth, not just government stimulated growth?
Mhm.
That's the best way to put it.
And I
Yeah.
do believe like there's a lot in this stimulus plan that is around that. I think the Biden administration like has been very vocal about that. I'm I barely find the time to like read a fiction novel at night, let alone the entire bill.
Just finished one, yeah.
But I will go by like what's been shared publicly from a policy standpoint, that some of this is not just about direct checks, and sure, money is not always appropriated in the same way, but it is also about, and perhaps the most powerful thing, is a stimulus of jobs, and jobs that represent the future of our economy.
Jobs. And one of the best impacts that the crypto community has given the world back, one of the best gifts that Satoshi Nakamoto has given the world is the ability to give millions of people around the world jobs today, to bring their families out of poverty, to work in our amazing industry. Myself included, Steve, Phil, all of us get to live and put food on our family's table because of Satoshi and Bitcoin and this whole crypto industry. Thank you guys so much for taking the time and coming on Untold Stories today. This was such an amazing show.